Hello, everybody. I'm here with my good friend Emily Gullikson, works with OptixEQ, and we're gonna sit here. We're gonna look at a couple races, but I think more importantly, we're gonna do a little bit of an overview over the Optics product. One of my favorite products to use. I've
We paid you to say that.
yeah, yes, very much so. But
Let's keep it up.
no, I mean, I've said it on stream before. I mean, there have been horizontal sequences I've hit for large amounts of money that I've strictly used optics for. Not necessarily always a great idea, I think, just to go based off the plot, but I think especially for getting a good picture of paces of races, I think it's a great tool. Um, so let's just kind of get into it here. Before we get into the plot, Emily here, just kind of I don't know if you want to just kind of go over the just even the original screen we get here, right? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, this is Selector. This is kind of like the back end for people that aren't subscribers that are just kind of seeing we put it up there and like where is it or just going on the website. This is the Selector. So it has like the drop down, the date, the track, the race number. You can start from there, and then the buttons that are below. I think pretty much for most people, they just kind of start with the plot 2020, which is what you had pulled up earlier. And that kind of gets you to a lot of those other, to the tab underneath, which is Optics Grid. You can access from that. The plot classic, we just left it. We updated the plot. The plot classic is actually classic 2.0 because there's even a raw version of that. But some people like it, and so we don't want to take it away, leave it. And then the buttons on the side, optics focus. That's what we kind of do, like our handicapping. We're tweaking that. We're going to come out with something good, something even better than an already good thing. But optics focus, you'll see for people that have the Breeders' Cup package, just kind of is sort of starts like with a wizard where you can kind of just drop down like, does this horse fit on class? Like for me on my end, I get to, select like, is this horse above, below? Same thing with pace, advantage, disadvantage. When the user has it, it'll already be pre-filled. And again, like I said, we're going to kind of adjust that. Optics scans the plots throughout that day, every single race, every single track. So if you wanted to look at different types of race shapes only, if you find that you have a strength and like a snowflake with like a lone speed, certain things like that, it can show you all those plots, and then you can kind of like spot play from there. Look at that plot and decide if you want to play a certain race. Optics rod is similar. Yeah, we'll just kind of pop up there. Is similar in the sense that you can filter certain keywords. So if you wanted to look at, show me all the BTL horses that are on the card, or at least in like the past 3 running lines, because we kind of focus more on recency. That'll pop up all those horses that have BTL races. So, again, it can kind of just help filter. Sometimes it gives people like, it can be kind of tedious sometimes, at least like I have to do a lot of handicapping, believe it or not, that it just kind of like puts your brain in a different place. Like, let me just start by looking kind of all over and then zooming back kind of in. So can kind of create that. And then I think that's all right. We did
Yep.
focus, rod, scan. Yeah. And then optics notes. That will just show the notes, but pretty much that's all in grid. When I hit that, that's where I input the notes, in case people are wondering. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yep. And yeah, I'll say that the probably I mean obviously I use the plot for the most part, but the scan is super useful when you know, especially if you're like playing tournaments or anything like that, and you're just like, hey, like I know this track is playing speed favoring. Let me just look at this track. Let's find a plot that has got a good fit, and hey, let's maybe an easy pace, and then you can kind of just look at those plots and kind of decide. It's awesome for playing, like I said, pick and praise, or playing any of those optional contests where you have a bunch of races. You kind of gotta look at a kind of at a glance. So, but yeah, let's take a look at just the plot in general here. I pulled up. We got 2 races that we're going to kind of look at. And Emily and I were talking a little bit. Not the best Breeders' Cup plots. Like easy to read, very clear. And it hasn't updated for scratches yet. But I will say one of my favorite parts of this product is that it updates for scratches.
Absolutely.
It's it's always so tough when you handicap the night 2 nights before, you got everything written down, all of a sudden you got a very key scratch, and you're like, all right, I got to go through this entire thing all over again. What does this pace look like now, right? Maybe you had a lone speed situation and then lone speed scratches out. What the heck am I looking at now? And so I love that this updates for scratches. You're
And
able
surface
to
changes and
and
distance
surface
changes
changes.
as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're able to just like see real time. Hey, all right, morning of, 3 horses scratched out. Let's take a look again, and everything kind of readjusts. And obviously with Breeders' Cup, we already do have a couple of very very early scratches. Friday morning these will get updated. Well, Saturday morning for sure for these, but they'll get updated, and you'll be able to kind of look at it again. But I'm telling you, the most common question I get whenever I pull up one of these on our handicapping shows is, what the heck am I looking at? So I don't know if you got like a 30-second 1 minute elevator pitch here to kind of explain optics, but I'll let the expert talk on this one.
Yeah, I mean, one, I think that's really the right question, right? Is like, what am I looking at? And really with optics, what you're looking at is you're looking at pace, you're looking at class, you're looking at speed, and you're looking at form. Because essentially, if you're handicapping any horse race, that's what you should be looking for, right? You have to assess how the race is going to play out, which horses kind of stand out. They're at the right level for their abilities. That's class. If they're fast enough to compete, and if they're in good form, right? And so with kind of a standard racing form, you can kind of get some of those pieces a little bit, but sometimes it's a little bit tougher. You have to maybe add an extra product and bring things in. And so that was kind of the idea with optics, is we want a tool that has those elements to it, that you can assess pace, you can assess class, you can assess speed, and you can assess form. And you're really looking at handicapping horses in that sense, right? So I hope that was 30 seconds, or I didn't go too far over, but pretty much that's it. That's what you're looking at.
Yep. Yep. And then I guess for somebody who's never looked at a plot, how would you explain kind of what the circles and the squares mean?
Well, I'll zoom out a little bit. What you're looking at when you're looking at the plot is a visual representation of the race shape. And the way the horses are positioned on the plot is in relationship to each other. And so you're looking at kind of first call, second call, finishing ability, right? So if you're looking at first call, you're reading the plot from left to right. Sort of the short version to go kind of second call is kind of more top to bottom, right? So if we're looking at this plot, and again, like Josh mentioned, there's not a lot of what we call like reliable plot fits. We'll code green. These are yellow, so there's a lot of open, like yellow, like caution, like open to interpretation. But let's pretend this was a green, right? You'd have like 7 on the lead at the first call, that second flight tracking. At the second call, maybe the 3 starts to make their move, and then going into the stretch, kind of following the diagonal that goes to the top left-hand corner, and that's where the circles and squares come into play. And that circles and squares has to do with the ability to finish in relationship to each other. So a horse could be a square in one race and then be a circle the next race, be in quadrant one race, be in quadrant 4 the next race. Again, it's all going to depend on who they're facing against. So you're looking at it a couple different ways, right? So it's, one of the things I'll hear a lot is, who does the plot like in this race? Like, the plot doesn't care. Like, the plot doesn't, really like anybody. It's kind of like your interpretation.
Yep.
And like for this plot, you would kind of look at it and say, like, just kind of like first glance, okay, I have to assess the 1 and the 7 right off the bat, because those horses look like they could potentially have a pace advantage. That's the other thing too with like race shapes, right? It's just I'm sorry to kind of like backtrack a little bit, but like with race shapes, sometimes you find those extremes, right? Where you have a lone speed, or you have like that bunched up race, and then there's the closer. And then there's a lot of races, most of the races that are kind of like this, where you're like, okay, this horse kind of looks like lone speed, but maybe this one can go and kind of push. And then, well, if this one's off form, I don't know if they're quite quick enough today, things like that. And you kind of are tweaking a little bit. So I think one of the good things with the plot is when you are looking at it, can kind of give you an idea of, are there any extremes? Are there any kind of standouts, and sort of working from that? So in this case, you do kind of have those big squares that both have positional speed, closing ability. The 7 Society, who is that furthest left at the first call, even though she's down in quadrant 3, still has finishing ability. And then Goodnight Olive, the projected favorite in this race, very, very solid, very consistent. She has tactical speed. She has the ability to finish. She can sit close to the pace. She can rate a little bit, and that's kind of reflected in the plot. So you'd be just kind of looking at kind of more those other kind of question marks, right? Like the shifts in like the 9, for example, where's that like where she's positioned on surface distance is kind of forward. And then if you're just kind of doing like a little bit more kind of analysis, like this horse is drawn on the outside. What other chance does she have in this race? She's going to have to go. Mm-hmm. Maybe she's not quick enough, but at least she's going to have to kind of push herself, kind of get herself out there, right? And then the 3's on the inside of the 7. So she can't really sit back either, right? Otherwise, that horse is gone. So she's got to kind of go. And then you have kind of the horses that are like in between with like the 2 and then the 4, like horses that they can push as well. The pace, we're kind of talking about this a little bit, how it's kind of tricky because the plot fit being yellow, there's the sun contention. So there's some of those horses that are in quadrant 1, but then the speed rate is low. The Optics run style match or RPM that has five of the 8 horses in this race, or 9 horses of this race. Am I counting this right? Do we not have somebody?
We have the 6. The 6 is Japanese, so not.
Right. Yeah, so we don't have her. Yeah, we don't have her in there. But you have five of the 8 that we're plotting share the same EP run style. So they're horses that can be kind of on or near the lead. The 7 kind of being more confirmed, but isn't lit up in green. It's still in black. So it's tricky. So part of that, I think this is kind of where we are going to kind of cut off and say, let's start talking record, is like why things kind of look the way they do. And you have horses that have had kind of like the favorable trips, like Society, she's had Lone. Ada's had like those perfect trips, and that's kind of impacting that position.
Yeah, and I think what's kind of cool about this too, and this is true of any product, right? And we internally when we talk about races, we constantly talk about, oh, that's a bad figure, right? Mm-hmm. You find a race, and one of the number of figure makers, right, give it a high figure, and then you see all the horses came and ran back, and it wasn't great, right? All the horses that run back ran way slower, so maybe you start thinking the figure's bad. Well, sometimes you start looking at this, and yeah, it's a yellow plot, but then we were talking beforehand. Like, I really like Society here because I think she's actually better. And I think she's a little bit more dangerous than even the plot shows. I definitely think that she's the speed in this race, and I expect that. I don't really expect to see a lot of closers now. Goodnight Olive obviously is coming in great form, right? Did run second last time, but I think she's pretty hard to leave off, which is like totally lame for a 8-horse or 9-horse race, right? And like you're looking at the two short prices, but I think that what's cool about this tool is then you start to think, if you have a different opinion, right? Maybe you look at this, you look at the PPs, and you're like, man, I think, and I'm not saying that this is exactly going to happen for this race, but maybe you look at the PPs and you're like, you see a bunch of 1s, and you're like, man, I don't know. I think there's more speed in here than maybe even shows up on the plot. Well, all of a sudden, you look at a horse like the 5, Kirstenbach, right, who's sitting way in the back, right, is unbunched from the rest of them. We talk about lone speed all the time, but hey, sometimes you get a lone closer. You get a horse that's just going to get a very, very clean trip and isn't going to be involved in any of the nonsense where all these other horses are bunched up. So, maybe that's a horse you take a flyer on. And like I said, I love this product for tournaments because I can't, in a tournament, I can't play the 1 or the 7 at all, right? Especially I'm playing like a pick and pray. If I can't play the 1 or the 7, my eyes go to 2 other horses, the 3 and the 5, right? And so then you kind of figure out, like, is the 3 who's kind of up there near the par line, like, is she just going to duel and maybe keep going, or hey, maybe the 5 does get that off the pace run and gets a nice clean trip. So
which, you know, talk about like the way that you interpret it is I made the case for the 4, who's a horse that's on the plot is tough to get to, but there's some reasons why. Um, and my case for Mare is basically the same case that I made for her on Derby Day, and we have it as DCTY DSTG1. I don't know. It's the race that's on
The Derby City Distaff. Yeah, the Derby City
Thank you. There you
Distaff.
go.
Yep.
Yeah. That is the same case I made for her that day. A little bit slight tweak, but similar in terms of trip. I thought she was coming into the race the right way, had a prep at Oakland Park, was second off, and was just in really great form in there. And I thought she'd get the right trip. I don't know. Do you want to pull up the grid? Because it's maybe easier to kind of explain what I'm kind
Which
of.
one? The grid notes here, or
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You never.
I have never looked at this really. Nope.
Wow.
These are just like the regular PPs, basically, right?
It's like, yeah, exactly. It's your standard past performance. So, and you can even kind of go if you really wanted to, and you just wanted to look at one horse, you can kind of select that. This is all filtered as well for the user. So if you wanted to like at the top, just look at which horses have a good record at today's surface distance, you could, or off track or whatever. But yeah, so Mare, I mean, if you just look at her in terms of speed figures, the Optics figure range for this race is 105 to 97. So what that says is for kind of this level of horse in this particular race, that's typically what the speed figure to win this race is. So her numbers stack right up. She's definitely fast enough. In terms of class, when I look at like today's a grade 1 race and I look at her other grade 1 races in her form, she's got a B, she's got a B plus, you know, like the grades are strong. Her current form, there's no red in those recent 3 running lines or this season really, coming out of a race that was like saved. It was a strong race off track that day. The June 24th race where it says free other, that was a day that back at Ellis Park where the track was very speed favoring. And that was the day you and I were at Crestwood, I believe. Yeah, and we were like talking about this race and how Mare, I think she was even favored in that race, was vulnerable because of the track profile coming off that win, and how Society was a play that day because she was going to get the profile and she got the trip, and that's part of why she kind of looks flattered a little bit, and Mare not so much. So kind of giving a little bit of an excuse to those races. Getting back to that Churchill Downs race, the other thing that's a little bit more subtle, it's just kind of knowing this horse and the way that she typically likes to run, where she can kind of put herself in the race, be outside of horses, and kind of be there in first run. And that's the trip I thought she would get in that race and get first run in Goodnight Olive. And that's the way it played out. And part of that has to do with the post position. So if we're looking at her post position, just kind of on Optics grid, you can kind of see like her last 2 races, she was 2, sort of on the inside. Post 5, she gets that outside stalking trip. Post 2, post 1, kind of even. Those outside 2 posts, post 7, she gets that trip. But she's sitting right there and can get that run. And that just kind of follows her pattern. Pratt's been with her for a while. And then this is a race too where, like you were talking about in terms of tournaments, I know the 1's going to be short. I know the 7's going to be short. And I don't know if they're logical, they're obvious. They could certainly win this race, but Mare can also, and she's going to be a better number. And I'm going to get some price compensation in that case.
Yeah. That's a great explanation. And like, yeah, I've not looked at this. Maybe I've looked at it a couple of times, but yeah, that's great. I didn't even realize that I could filter off the muddy races, because I honestly, like, I'm a very big proponent of that, right? Like, there are just horses that they get in the slop and they forget that they're horses, right? They run complete, and the opposite, right? You got your hidden scroll types that just completely freak one time in the slop and then just never run a step again. Yeah, that's awesome.
Let me show you a short way on the top where it'll say like this race easy filters up at the yeah. Just go to like surface distance. Yep. And that'll kind of cut it down too, because 7 furlongs is kind of a specialty, right? And you can kind of see how, So some horses do, not even just in terms of like, how they finish, but if they have stronger numbers. And then you can even like on where it says OFIG
Mm-hmm.
in the green, like on the top. I'm like trying to point, like you can
Oh,
see
here.
me. Yeah, just click
Oh,
on the
fig.
green though. Click one more click. That'll like go it from like fast to slow.
Yep.
So I mean, you can really like kind of mess around in there.
Yeah. Cool.
And their numbers, I mean, they're all pretty close.
Nice.
You can see too the race shapes, and then you can also see too. I think this comes into play a lot too. Is you can see the past plots. You can see where the horse is plotted in the past. You can see like where if there's an upgrade or downgrade. If they were a quadrant 1 square last time and now they're a quadrant 3 circle or a quadrant 1 circle, you can see those subtle changes. Same thing with the race shapes too. It'll have those past race shapes. So you can kind of look at some of the races and say, okay, well today's a sun contention with a low speed rate. Which horses run well when they have that type of scenario?
Mm-hmm.
Are there some of these horses that just kind of like fit this type of race shape when it's kind of muddy? So I mean, you can really mess around with these analytics.
Nice. I'll have to play around with that. I got homework for the night now.
Oh yeah.
Before your seminar tomorrow at Villa Park, which hopefully I will be able to make it up there. It sounds like I have tomorrow off, and I think
Oh, cool.
Ryan hopefully is going to be joining us as well. So,
That'd be
but
awesome.
yeah. So
Free pizza. Nothing
hey,
else.
well now I mean I'm basically losing money if I don't go. So
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah. So I guess kind of going forward to maybe more of a bit of a more straightforward plot, I think, in my mind here. Race 7, which is the Distaff, and I've had a pretty strong opinion in this race, and the plot kind of reinforces it for me, for the most part. I will say that a little question with the speed rate being slow, which has got me taking another look, but. Yeah, this in this one, I think you kind of got a more even balance. It seems like between E and EP types versus your presser and closers here. But yeah, I like for me, I still really like the 9 Clairiere based off this plot. I was we were even talking earlier. I did think there was a little bit more pace pressure, but I think you made a really good point. Like, yeah, there's horses that like to be forward, but not necessarily horses that want to be on the lead in this race, which does have me kind of maybe second guessing a little bit. But I don't know. What do you kind of see here?
Yeah, I thought this race was really tricky too. And Clairiere is a horse that over the last 2 Breeders' Cups, going 2 back, she should have won. Just straight up, that she was so good in that. And I felt like I was coming into the giving that backstory because I felt like I was coming into this being like more critical of her, like
Mm-hmm.
than I've because she's going to be shorter. Maybe she's just not the same as she's been in the past. She's a 5-year-old mare now. But she fits in this race. And I think there's enough horses in here that are kind of like now horses that the 4-1 to me, I would look elsewhere. I'll be honest. I think that she fits. I don't think 4-1 is fair odds, but I think she's going to drift off that because I think there's some other horses in here. I just think she gets forgotten in the sense that, she doesn't have a recent win, things like that. And I think she'll drift. And I think that at fair odds. One of the other things, this is like one of those races that I was kind of looking at, like, because it's kind of a weird dynamic, the fire contention and the low speed rate. And I was looking at on the grid and I'm looking at Clairiere, and these are races that this type of scenario is where she wins. The race 3 back, the Ogden Phipps, when she closed into that race, that was a fire contention and a 17 speed rate, pretty similar to today. going back even further, let me see what race this is. The cotillion is the same thing, fire contention, a low speed rate. So she's been able to run in these type of race shapes in the past.
Yeah, and I mean even the Shuvi where she ran second, I mean the speed rate was only 25, which I think for a fire contention is still a bit low. Uh,
Yep.
like rule of thumb for me is usually around 30 35, where I'm kind of like okay, that's getting kind of high there. Um, and yeah, I mean I think if you've looked at other products as well, you'll see that she has been able to close into relatively modest paces as well. So,
Yeah, and her form really hasn't dropped off that much. I know you're watching the video earlier, but I was like, maybe she has PTSD from Saratoga after hitting her head last year,
yeah,
and didn't run that well, and the barn was a little bit cold at that time. But the race, the race in the slop can kind of be a little bit forgiving. But when you just look at her on the play, she hasn't shifted. It's not like she's become like a quadrant four circle or something, or started to move around. She's been a quadrant four square. She's a quadrant four square today. Um, yeah, and I think the number will be higher than that 4-1, and that would make her playable.
yep. I definitely have one friend Stu, I think, who would be very happy if that number floated up because I think this is one of his favorite horses of all time. Yeah,
Well, I mean, just to kind of just talk about that, but I mean, I just think there's other horses in here that are gonna take more money. I mean, a more obvious is Idiomatic and Adair Manor, but like search results will take money, wet paint will take money, randomize certainly. She's not going to be longer than like Desert Dawn, any of those, but I think those horses take more money than her. Not more than her, but more than what they're assigned to kind of drift Clarier up, if that makes
yep.
sense.
Nope. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and just real quick, I like you said, you have the no handle. That just means the horse didn't handle the surface, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting in this race though that you have a couple of turf notes on here. I think Desert Dawn. I thought they were going to try to get on the turf at some point, and they scratched out or the race came off the turf. I forget what, but I
Doesn't
could
look
have
like either one. Doesn't look like
no.
because we put that in the grid, and I'm not seeing that.
Mm. For some reason, I thought they were trying to get that horse on the turf, but maybe I'm mistaken. But yeah, I mean, you got to assume anything with Baffert's name on it in California is going to take money. I was uh, I was a little surprised to see. Well, Idiomatic's coming in on a really really nice form here. I guess I just assumed that Dare Manor would be your second choice,
Mm-hmm.
which it is tied for second choice here. But I just thought it's going to be closer to like 2-1 on Idiomatic, maybe 3-1, 3-1, 5-2 on a Dare Manor, which might be enough in of itself to float a horse like Clarier up.
Well, and I mean, randomize. I think randomize will take money,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, coming winning the Alabama and then the Beldame. Uh, which is interesting because you got red words all over that horse.
We
So
got red words all over a lot of horses in here.
yeah, so which generally just means that you think that well a lot of them are perfect or lone. I see a lot or bias. Obviously, or even flow. I think flow plus sometimes comes up as red. I'm not sure. No, race flow doesn't.
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, it's yeah, this is probably the most read words I've seen on a plot in quite some time. Um,
And
honestly,
that's
oh, go ahead.
no, that's what makes this race kind of tricky too, because a lot of those redwood horses are horses that have kind of had their own way on the front end, or perfect trips forwardly placed. And when you look at the plot, they're all bunched together today. So it
Hmm.
doesn't look like anybody's going to get lone of that group, or anybody's going to get perfect. They're going to have to earn it.
Yeah, and it's funny because now that I'm looking through some of these like previous races, a lot of these horses have not. I mean, a couple of them have gone up against each other, but not a ton. Which is, I think, why you have all these horses coming in with perfect trips in graded stakes races because none of them are racing against each other. So, but
Yeah.
that's a problem for another podcast or a video. But yeah, I mean, plot withstanding, the other horse I was a little bit interested in was the 3 Pretty Mischievous, because I thought that on paper had a pretty similar run style. I think to a horse like Clairiere, might be a
Yep.
little bit closer up to the pace. Um, doesn't necessarily plot out so well. I don't.
I,
You
I think I think her plot's kind of okay, especially because it's close to the par line on
hmm
surface distance, and so she's got that like kind of 2 turn speed. Or second call speed. And she's improving as well. I mean, she's one of the 3-year-olds in the field, and her recent numbers are going in the right direction. So she's in this type of race shape, I don't mind that plot for her.
cool. Anything else? I said this is going to be 15-minute video, and of course we go a half hour. But
You didn't
anything
tell me
else?
that I would have been shorter.
Anything else on the Breeders' Cup? Obviously, you got the subscriber video up. I was in the middle of watching that when we started this, but you guys have a nice package for the weekend. I think it's $50 for Breeders' Cup. You get the video, you get the focus, you get all that stuff for the entire weekend. So check that out. Obviously at OptixEQ.com. Anything else kind of going on?
Well, we talked about the tomorrow at Villa Park for everybody
Seminar,
that's
yep.
local. So I'm sure everybody watching is all local. Also I mean, as far as optics, yeah, the Breeders' Cup package it's a smoking deal. I mean, it's pretty much the same package that we run every single day of the year, right? We're just adding stuff to it. Where typically everybody like adds stuff and then jacks up the price. We just keep it the same. The $50 covers all the tracks for that weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you have access to Aqueduct, to whoever else is running, to Woodbine.
Churchill.
Yeah, Churchill. Everybody that's running, you have access to it. So it's not just the Breeders' Cup races. You get the focus. The video was kind of like, I sent John a message because like we always talk the races, and I'm like, let's just film it. We're going to talk the races
Yeah.
anyways, and put it to our subscribers. And if they want to watch, cool, and maybe we'll publish it later or whatever. On Twitter this weekend, I'm going to try something. This might suck, but I'm going to try to do it to cover the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge tournament on Spaces. I'm going to try to get people to just kind of to talk, or I'm going to try to find what people are playing and like follow the leaderboard and just try to talk from that kind of standpoint. From Hawthorne, we're really we really promote contests a lot and contest play, and of course a lot of our players are playing in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, so like want to support them and at the NHC, and just thought let's give this a try. I've never even done a Spaces like hosting and trying to discuss a tournament that I don't have action to or access to. Tough, but maybe it'll be cool. We'll see.
Yeah, apparently.
I think you just got to try stuff sometimes. And
Yeah,
if it works, great. And if it doesn't, you pretend it never happened.
yeah.
Move on.
Mark won a seat, and we are trying to talk him into wearing a shark costume because he's going to be on site at Santa Anita. So we're trying to get him to wear a shark costume during the contest. We are in negotiations to see if that is going to happen.
What's the shark?
I have no idea, but Caleb, I think he posted a picture of him wearing a shark costume or something, and
Okay.
someone's like, "You got to wear that to BCBC," and so I think we're trying to convince him, but yeah, he had to catch some type of stray in here somewhere. I mean, if a
Absolutely.
square ass horse player like Mark Capitan can qualify to BCBC, I think anybody can.
Okay.
But
You heard it.
Emily, thank you for your time. Obviously, check her out at Emily OptixEQ. Check out Optics at OptixEQ.com, and we'll catch you guys later.